Flags to learn more flags to learn, son.
Hi, good day to you all. I welcome you all for the today's international webinar on the Writers' Convention. The capacity to learn is a gift. The ability to learn is a skill. The willingness to learn is a choice. Yes, you have made the right choice by registering for our international webinar on the Writers' Convention. Yes, respected professors and dear students, you have got food for your ears today. There are two sessions which will make you feel like you are an intellectual elite. The first session is of Dr. Shanti Chitra. She is an eminent academician cum published author. She has chosen to speak on the art of creative writing. I assure you that her speech will be a sure guide for you in the art of creative writing. Respected professors and dear students, if you have any queries related to the art of creative writing, you are most welcome to raise your questions to Dr. Shanti Chitra at the end of the first session. The second session is of Dr. Lydia. She is a chartered scientist from published author. She is an interviewee for an international webinar second session. She will be interviewed by the representative of the Department of English, Kamraj College, sir. Respected professors and dear students, I appreciate you taking time off your busy schedules to join us today. I hope you learned a lot today from our international webinar on the Writers' Convention. Let's begin our international webinar with Tamil Thai Valtu.
நீராறும் கடலுடுத்த நிலமடந்த செழியொழுகும் சீராரும் மதனமென திகழ்வரத கண்டமெனில் தெக்கணமும் அதிர்ச்சிறந்த திராவிடனல் திருநாளும் தக்க சிறு திரை நுதலும் தரித்தனரும் திலகமுமே திலக வாசனை போல் அனைத்துலகும் இன்பமுற எத்திசையும் புகழ் வணங்க இருந்த பெரும் தமிழனே
The dignitary to honor us with their presence to grace the occasion is Mrs. Shamla, HOD of English, Kamraj Colleges. Let me ask her to give the welcome speech for our international webinar on the Writers' Convention. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Muthumari. Good afternoon to all of you. It gives me immense happiness and pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of the Department of English, Kamraj College, Tuticorin. I welcome Dr. Shanti Chitra and Dr. Lydia, the resource persons of today's session. I thank Dr. Shanti Chitra, who is a part of us for the second time. Welcome, ma'am. I welcome Dr. Lydia, who has consented to give us an interview session. Welcome, ma'am. We are eagerly waiting for you to share your ideas in the interview. I welcome the principal, Dr. Nagarajan, and the director, Mr. Tony Melvin, for today's webinar. And I wholeheartedly encourage Dr. P. Shashikala and Mr. Sri Shakti Prem for organizing the webinar. It is to be noted that they are organizing the third webinar on behalf of the Department of English. Thank you. I wholeheartedly welcome the participants, the research scholars, the learned faculty members of various colleges and institutions from various states and overseas. Welcome to you all and thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, let me ask Ms. Sugandhi, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Kamraj College, SF, to give her felicitation speech honoring Dr. Shanti Chitra. Over to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. The institution welcomes with great pride and energy the online presence of Dr. K. Santichitra, Head and Associate Professor of English, SRM Institute, Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. Today, we invite Dr. Santichitra as a published author. Her reputation as a writer is a matter of progress to our society to be a more immaculate one. Dr. Santichitra has published over 3 novels in English. She is quite known for her 2016 novel, The Fractals. Her other novels like Intimate Strangers and Lonely Marriages are critically acclaimed for their portrayal of domestic life. She also has the credit of writing several short stories. It has to be noted that Dr. Santichitra is a critic who thrives in the field of phenomenology and existentialism. Dear ma'am, we explore you to delight and teach us the real art of creative writing. We are indeed very much pleased to have Dr. Santichitra here in our midst to interact with us. Without further ado, I welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for all the good words. Can I start it? Can I ask it start?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, over to you, ma'am.
Okay, so can I share my screen now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I hope it's visible now to all.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and how is my audibility is fine?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think somebody is waiting in the room.
Ma'am?
Just a second. I'll just go to the screen and then I'll start. I hope the slide is shown to all.
Yes, ma'am, we could see it.
All right, thank you so much. Thanks once again for all the good words, and I'm very happy to join you all once again. And today I'm not joining as an academician, as a teacher, but then I'm joining you all as a writer. And sometimes it's not really very easy to exactly say what it feels like to write. So since I was given this enormous task of talking about art of creative writing, I had lots of introspection about my own self. I started wondering when I started writing and what exactly is the idea which makes me into me, and what are the kinds of writings that I am inclined toward to. What kind of books do I read? What kind of movies do I watch? Now, all that actually gave me even better an idea about my own self, which I think I'll be able to share it with you all, and that will give you a better perspective about this art of creative writing as such. But even before I begin, I would like to insist upon that there are very few people who actually start off writing at their later part of your life. If they do it, that means somewhere that the writer was there inside them, but whom they never woke up. But generally speaking, this creativity is something which is actually a kind of an urge, which starts off from a very early age. And we start observing things, and then we start trying to understand what is happening around us. And this desire to create something else, like you would be able to see in the first slide of mine, there's a person who's trying to change the color of her wall and her ceiling. Now, that is all about it, actually. The moment you feel like you're not happy with the wall which is around you or the ceiling which is around you, you want to reconstruct it. You want to show something else. And that was the moment when you actually start creating. And when you start doing it, after a point of time, you would get this urge to show it off to others also, to tell them like, this is what I have created for myself. This is the kind of a world that I'm expecting to be around me. And that was the moment when you actually start you actually start publishing, or you actually start telling others that this is your work of art. And another word, this word art, is something which is used so often by all of us that I think we have almost lost the meaning of the word art. It's almost like another word which we have, which is so much is used, is love. And we have used it so much that we have almost lost the meaning of it. That's what I feel. Art is not that ordinary as we use it often. Art is something which will actually drain us. In fact, it's not easy. It might look beautiful. It might seem giving happiness, but what kind of happiness does it really give it to a creative artist or the person who's involved in it is known only to him or her. It's not easy, because we not always are talking about happy stuff in our work. We are talking about something which will have lots of pain. And when you live a pain itself is something which is not easy, and then you relive it. And when you start reliving it, it needs lots of capacity. And that's why I told that this is a capacity which is to be developed from a very early age. There's urge to express ourselves through some other medium. The medium of art, it can be painting, it can be sculpture, it can be writing. Now, when you do it at the end, when you finish it, or even while you are doing it, it's not easy. It will be such a painful process, actually. So preparing yourself for that is very much essential. And it is always better that we start off anything from an earlier age. But it is possible for few people who are used to reading serious books, serious literature. So even at a later stage, you can start off because you already are full of the difficult lives that is there around you. You're fed with through those books. So if you have the capacity to absorb all those pains in you, it is always possible for you to live them, relive them, and recreate them. So that's one point of view which I wanted to insist upon even before I begin. And the next one is, we talk a lot about imagination. We say that something imagination is there, which actually takes us to a different plane altogether. But the basic point is, imagination is not something which comes to us out of the blue. We cannot actually go beyond this world or whatever the other imagination which is there already in us, like the outer world, the constricted culture, the kind of a lifestyle that we lead. Now, these are all there already in us. And just like how we cannot go beyond nature, we cannot go beyond reality as well. Now, what we call as imagination mostly is something which will be a different kind of an different kind of a reality, just placed in a different position. So basically, the ingredients that we will be having will be the same. It's from the real world. And the only thing is, I'll be painting it differently. Like, I have a wall and I have few paints. Maybe it was earlier white. Now I'll be making it into a different color, red perhaps. But then I cannot go beyond that. Like, I can't imagine anything which doesn't really exist here. So only thing that I'm going to do is put the boxes in different position. I'm going to make them feel that this is better than that. So that is all that we do. So thinking of something which never happened is just not possible. It would have happened somewhere. It might, it could be a possibility. It's just a kind of the mismatching, or you match it with something else. So the probability game is what is happening in the name of imagination. So you don't have to think that I lack imagination. We all do have lots of imagination. If you look back, you will understand how much imaginative you were as a kid. But then the indoctrination, and then people telling us this is right or this is wrong. Now, all that makes us into a human beings who are not capable of imagination, really. So when we start confining ourselves to a certain kind of life or certain kind of ideas as the only truth, we start lacking this ability to reconstruct things. So I'm not saying we are constructing altogether a different thing with different materials. We are just reconstructing. We are only deconstructing. We are only reliving the reality in the name of imagination. So these are the basic things which we have to have, and which can be cultivated provided we expose ourselves to more reading. And the next point I wanted to talk about was, like, we all would have come across this idea of dental flossing. We clean our teeth often. Now, the purpose is we don't want anything to be left there. And when we leave anything out there, it will start decaying. It can destroy the entire the oral health of us. We take care of it so much because the pain is so visible. It's so perceptible. We feel the pain so much. We don't want that to happen. When we smile, we want our looks not to get spoiled. So we're very particular about this dental flossing. But what about mental flossing? Now, I would like to mention that my parents have always had this habit of telling us their stories, their childhood stories, the stories about their parents and certain situations, which sometimes were heroic, sometimes were pathetic, sometimes were tragic. Now, all these stories, they kept telling us, and more than my brother, I used to listen to all these things more intensely. And so it stayed with me for a very long period of time. And when it stayed with me, and there were certain point of views which remained with me forever. And one such was, it seems my father's father, my paternal grandfather, he used to say that people will have to clean their mind with a broomstick with which they are cleaning the drainage. Now this is something which was often repeated. This like, why did he say that? What exactly happened? Now all those backgrounds. Now beyond those backgrounds, the statement it made so much sense to me even since I was a child. There's something which we need to clean. Some kind of a unlearning has to take place. Some kind of an understanding of this world in a different manner has to take place, and that is possible only when we clean off all that which is dumped in us. Sometimes I wonder if this mental flaws is ever possible, because the kind of a news that we are fed with, the kind of ideas that is told to us. I find some of very young students who don't even have enough exposure to real life, they get into media and then they start propagating ideas. Now, it doesn't mean that if you're young, you cannot really think. But what I'm trying to say is, how much have you read? How much have you lived? What exactly do you have? Do you have an understanding of this world? How exactly are you presenting all these ideas to us? So what is happening to us is we are constantly fed with several ideas. And all these ideas somewhere are not new. In fact, they are decayed. In fact, they are only going to make us rot even further. So how exactly are we going to change that? Now, if you start developing this urge to express yourself better, and your urge to change your atmosphere and to create something else out of what is already is there present in your hands, what you need is this mental flossing. And as I told you, nothing new is possible. We can't create something out of nothing. We already have all the ingredients, all the ideas around us. What is to be done is how exactly are going to floss this? How exactly are you going to check the feasibility of it, or the necessity of it, or how exactly are going to weigh the unnecessary parts of it which you don't really need, which is weighing you down, which is weighing down your society. So all these things, if it is done constantly by us, then it will give a better perspective. It will create a better perspective in us, and we will be able to create a better world. And that kind of a confidence, if we have, then we can set off to write. Now, it is not just like that we set off to write. There's a creative urge which we cannot manage at all. So a kind of a madness we can call that a kind of a pressure which we cannot overcome at all. To be a teacher at the same time to write is not easy. There are full-time writers who will have all their times allotted only for writing, but it's not easy for them also. It's not just merely about time, but you have to divide your mind into two different areas. You have to take care of something which is to be constructed in a classroom, and something which you start constructing for the world which is outside waiting for you. Perhaps maybe it's just an imagination. You think the world is going to change after you write it, but you might be thinking like there are not many who are actually are reading your book. Now, who are you actually writing for? Now, that was the kind of a feeling that Kafka might have had, Franz Kafka. Now, when he started writing, he hardly was able to publish it. And the one work which he published, it never reached anywhere. And then later when he started, he couldn't quit it really. His father was not very approachable. He was not encouraging. The world around him were not encouraging. His one work failed him miserably, but he still kept writing. Now, why was he writing? The question or the answer to that is simple, but it's very difficult to have lived it, because the urge to express oneself is something which which cannot be expressed in any other words at all. You wouldn't mind even if the whole world crumbles around you because of your writing, and still you would want to write. Now, that's the kind of an urge which you got to have when after which you have to start writing. And how do we write? There is this questioning the finitude, which we all will be having in us. We have to create a character, a being who will be there in the story. And then there is this predicament which the character will face. And mostly that predicament will be a difficult or a very unpleasant situation. Now, when a creator starts creating, now this character or the predicament, something will be there in his mind, but mostly both has to be there. Sometimes you will begin even without having any of it. There'll be just the urge to write. What is making you to, what is pushing you to do this? You won't even have the understanding of it, but still you will be sitting there with something in your mind with which doesn't have an image, which doesn't have words. It will be just sitting there and waiting for that character to emerge from somewhere and that predicament to fall on your head from somewhere. Now, these are the two things which will happen after you start reading them. I'm sorry, after you start writing about them. Now, when you started, when you decide that you have started to write, it's not going to be easy, because the beginning will be very unpleasant, because actually you're looking for a difficult or an unpleasant situation. And when you start doing it also, as I told you before, living a pain is not easy, reliving it is even more difficult. And so the process is going to be even more difficult. So these are the things which you will be doing when you start writing. And as I told you, there are kinds of people, writers who will be writing along with the world. Their ideas will be flowing along with what the rest of the world will be expecting from them. That would be mostly considered as the bestseller kind of. But I couldn't somehow write a kind of story which will be appealing to everybody. I just couldn't make it till date. Somehow I feel that when I start writing, it is always as difficult. And I end up arguing with my own self, sometimes with my own characters. And then after a point of time, you would find that those characters themselves are not under my control. They just start living on their own. Now, all these processes are something which we allow ourselves to enter. It's not a very happy experience, but then you feel that you have to do it. Now, why do we feel that we have to do it? It's something both beautiful, it's both nagging, and it has got several other reasons because of which we start writing. And this is one idea which I always find in most of the writing. I find this happening around us. I find this existing in our society as the very basis of a very construction of a psyche. The thing is revenge, vengeance, retaliation. Somehow all the stories that we read from or that we have heard from our childhood, or the stories that we come across meant for adults, now they all have this idea. We seek revenge. There's a kind of a vengeance which will continue. And one example is when you read this Ant and the Grasshopper, at the end, the children are taught that the grasshopper suffered and the ant did not share anything with it. Now, the idea is justice is being imparted. Now, is that all that we need? And then when you look at any adult story, we find that if there is any estranged love story, we find that the guy avenges or the girl avenges. Either of them take revenge for what has happened. And then the love story becomes a revenge story, and then it ends. Now, what exactly are our prayer? What are we actually looking for? What is our understanding of justice in a society? aren't we in a way are looking only for the same kind of a pain getting inflicted on the other? That gives us happiness. That makes us think that justice is being done. But is that justice? Now, I remember, I can't help relating with the particular tribes in Africa, where even before the child is born, the mother will be thinking of, I mean, even before she meeting the person through whom she's going to have a child, have a baby, she'll be actually thinking of a song for the baby. And it seems that the moment she thinks that she wants a baby, that is the day which is considered as the birth of that child. And the moment she thinks of that, she starts, she goes away, she sits in an isolated place, and she starts writing a poem for the baby, which she will have in future. And she takes this poem to the person through whom she wants to have this child. He reads it, he understands it, and then they fall in love with each other. They have a baby, and the song is something which will be throughout sung by her, even when it was in her womb. And then later, when the baby is born, the rest of the society, the tribes will all be singing the same song for the child. Every time the child achieves something in its life, the song will be sung to it again. And then when the child at any point of time is not able to do well in its life, and if it has its own nemesis, its own fall, which it was not able to overcome at all, then people will not be blaming him, but then they will be blaming themselves also. Along with that, they'll be singing the song. The song's words will be related to what kind of a human being this being is going to be. That was the mother's conception even before the baby was born. Now, I feel like that kind of an understanding we need to have even before when we start writing. It's similar to that. When you write, you know, this is something which you want. And why do you want it? You do not want to have revenge. You do not want a retaliation. You do not want vengeance. But then you have a very different justice system in your mind. Your prayer is different. And all that you want is a very beautiful piece of life to emerge out of this piece of art that you're going to create. Now, that's the kind of an idea which I have had, because I do not believe in punishment. I do not believe that punishment has ever was able to do any good to this world. We are only are increasing this more and more at every point of time. We are happy the moment somebody is punished. But have you really thought of like what has made this being into whatever he was? Do we not have a share in it? Don't we think that we also have contributed to the same somewhere? So this is something which I could never get over ever. So all my works will be reflecting upon that. So this is the kind of an understanding which I've had always. And another very important point is how does it feel and to become a writer, and what makes a writer? You know, the desire to have a world for how it should be is something so intense, a feeling that it's not easy to hold back that desire at all. And each time the understanding of writing it, every time one ventures into writing it, is not easy either. In fact, it's deathly, I should say, because grasping the world as it is and putting it into a certain framework and taming it to certain extent is quite ambitious a task. And taming its wilderness, its disorder and chaos, because it's not a very beautiful world that we live in. All that which we find around, if you try to observe inside you, it can have its own side effects. It's not easy at all. And if you start remembering intensely the times that we have been suffering, we wouldn't want to live at all. The very reason why we are able to forget things, the pain, we have to only relive to feel the same pain. But then what happens to a writer is reliving that pain becomes a kind of an addiction, and then they do it all the time. And when they do it, they almost try to make it 100% the same intense emotion that originally it gave them is what they try to live, and it's not easy. I remember intensely the times that I have been suffering, which I couldn't. We might not even want to live that again, but still we would get back into that, and then we try to live it. That's not easy. And one more point which I earlier stated is when we start living, even from the beginning, we want happiness for our children always to surround them with. But somewhere children got to be taught what exactly pain is also. If you will create an utopian kind of a world for them in a house alone, and later when the child gets exposed to the real world outside, it'll be too much for the child to take. And it won't be able to get accommodated to the real world at all. So when it is good that if a child is allowed to get exposed to certain pain and realize what is happening around it, at the same time the child must also have some happiness. Otherwise, the responsibility of a writer, or like I say that it is the same responsibility of a teacher also, that the responsibility to create a better world is something which will not take place in them if they are simply made to express only their pain. If sometimes that can have a very bad effect on them, which a kind of a negativity which will seep in them, because of which they will only want pain around them, and as much pain do they have inside them. But we don't have much of writers like that who want the world to suffer. But somewhere we will find that there must be some meaning out of which, out of whatever they have created, that is to be pondered upon. And another point is a work becomes beautiful based on the choice of our words and how economically we use them. The balancing of the sentences. Now, these are all possible again only if we expose ourselves to more number of better books. The more we read, we will be able to work on that. We all have the capacity to narrate an incident to someone else. We always tell them, this is how it happened. In fact, there are people who will be so good at narrations, but then ask them to write, they find it difficult. The listening to a story is different. It just takes a while for us to grasp it. But then to live a story, you got to make the person to read your story. So narration is different, and writing of it is different. And when you write down, what happens is the person who reads it starts living it along with you. And as many times he or she reads, so many times they're able to see it. Now, going back to the earlier slide, I spoke about this revenge, vengeance, retaliation. There are a few writers who are in whom you cannot find this at all. And one is Hermann Hesse, and another is O.V. Vijayan. O.V. Vijayan is a Malayalam writer, and his particular work, this Legend of Kashakanta Itihasam, it will have a very beautiful end. He actually goes through a kind of a purgation. He suffers. What he had done was not something which is forgivable for him. So he leaves out everything, and then he goes to a remote village, and then he starts living a very simple life there. And all through he was suffering, and then he was not able to get over the guilt. At the end, what happens is a snake actually, a snake bites him, and he doesn't want to kill the snake. What he does is he just talks to the snake saying, run away before somebody else comes and sees you biting me. He says, he talks to it like talking to a child. He says, maybe it's teething time for you, and that's why you're just biting around. Even before somebody comes, you will have to run away. Now, at the end, he actually dies, but we don't feel like he's actually is dead. In fact, the transition from this kind of a life which is loaded with guilt, his death will look very peaceful. So that is also a punishment, but then that punishment involves the person in it. So we hanging him for what he had done. It is about he realizing what he had done and suffering it. Now, in fact, in a way that's more brutal comparatively, but that kind of a change has to take place. And similarly, Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha, now this is another inspiration of mine, I should say, because in that again, the person, he understands what life through the punishments that life itself gives him. Not that one individual human being with a particular book he holding in his hand in the name of law or scripture, telling the other person that this is right or wrong. It is about the individual growing up enough inside his head to understand what life is. Now, this is the kind of a writing that I always aspire to have, to write. I must say that I'm still in the process. It will take some time for me. It might take a very long time also. In fact, reading my own work again is something which I won't do that again, because I'm afraid that I might not like it, because every moment, every second, I think a kind of a growth takes place in us, and it doesn't really makes us love what we have done earlier. And Philip Roth actually, like instead of me telling you how exactly to sit and write, I thought like I must say what Philip Roth thinks about it. He says it takes sometimes even months for him to reach the first page. He says like 250 to 300 pages he would have written, and then he'll come across that one particular line, that one particular paragraph, which he would want as his first line or first paragraph for his novel. So that's the kind of way that he writes. For him, and what does he do with all those 250 pages? He says like, I don't even look into it. I don't want to because I'm afraid. Now that's the same feeling you would have. Whatever you have discarded, it's better it is discarded. When you go back, you will have your own contradictions of thoughts. And he also says that when you finish a book, you become a kind of an enemy to your own work. You would start hating your own book. Now, I have not hated my book yet. Maybe if somebody else tells me about what exactly it is to hate your own book, I'm still not able to understand that. Maybe I'll understand that at some point of time. The point is, when he says that he hates his own book, that's the point which makes me curious. When I do not understand something, like I feel like I'm at the dead end. I'm like banging my head on a wall, and then I feel so miserable. It becomes so claustrophobic. I'm so curious to know what is beyond that. Now, what is it to feel that? So that actually makes me to understand ideas. And another point is to defamiliarize and to come out with new layers of meaning. The point is, as I told you, everything is around us with which we are going to build a book, which we are going to create. And so this defamiliarizing is the idea of creating something which is already is there, and then looking at it with a different perspective. There are multiple questions which a writer tends to suffer while intending to write. And for that, he or she will be defamiliarizing one's own experiences and allow a new perception of approach to something old, to allow a fresh perspective. The characters created by you will, after a point, will start evolving on their own, and you will have no control over them. They'll give birth to more characters and new perspectives. You'll have arguments with them. You'll have no understanding of how or why they are talking like that. Sometimes you might find that the whole idea is wrong, and then you would start wondering what is wrong then. And then these are the conversations, and somewhere you will end up, and you would feel like the experience is whole, and then the book will end. Now, that's perhaps is what Philip Roth is trying to say. That's one understanding that I'm trying to have. I want to share here one experience which I had related to this when I wrote my first novel. In my first novel, The Fractals, I had one weird experience, I must say, because this book was written in 2015, and there was a particular character, an imaginary character. And there was a particular character in her life, she had the habit of imagining things. So she had an imaginary character in her mind, and you will find that this particular character meets, I mean, this girl will be meeting a person in real. Now, the imaginary person actually happens to meet her, meet the other person whom she was to meet in real. I'll tell you, to make it simpler, there is this Ganga, and she is a sex worker, and she has the habit of imagining an ideal world in which she will be a very chaste woman devoted to a man. And then at a point of time, she just loses her chastity, and then the husband of hers loses his sanity. So this is her imagination. And in real, she was about to meet a person, and what happens is, this person who has lost his sanity and imagination, I somehow had written meeting the real guy. So those pages, like how did that even happen? I had no idea. But then 2018, we came across this Bandersnatch and Black Mirror concepts, where the real got into the imagination and the imagination conversed with the real. Now, so perfectly were those pages written that I wonder how I did that. I had no idea of like how it even happened. The story after a point starts evolving on its own. And I remember the director Nalan Kumarasamy actually asking me about that. Nobody else has actually seen that as extraordinary. He was able to see that, and he asked me like, how did that happen? What was my intention? I said like, it was beyond me. I had no idea how it happened. So that is the kind of the moment of that book. Okay, it's something which is so beautiful for me, which makes me think that I'm not just me when I start writing. There are things which starts happening on its own. Is the idea which I realized with that experience. And you know, this is again is said by Philip Roth. He said, if you're too sure and if you're too fluent, the signal is to stop. Being in the dark from sentence to sentence is convincing, according to him. But how does it feel to walk blindfolded? Now, this is a very true experience to any writer as such, because I told you, I do not fall into the category of where I'll be accepted by the entire world. My writing will disturb a lot, and people will not be very happy, because it will be jolting them off their slumber of the lethargic life that they are all leading. So that kind of a reading, I mean, that kind of a writing, if you are at, then you cannot really make everybody comfortable with your writing. So in that case, if I go on smoothly with all fluency, and then if I do not find anything disturbing at all, then I should actually stop, because I have to go against the tide, and going against the tide is not going to be easy. So every sentence of mine needs lots of, it demands lots of work. And then, and it's almost like you walk blindfoldedly. You just go along with the sentences over which you don't even have any power. And I told you before, for any reader, reading is, any writer, reading is the fuel. You have to be obsessively be reading. The more you read, the more life you will understand, the more possibilities of different possibilities you will get to know. And we do not really write to impress anybody, not even self sometimes, as I told you. You'll come across characters which you never had in your mind to have created at all. You'll come across people whom you never wanted to give birth to. Sometimes they'll start convincing you. In fact, you will feel that you're yielding to them. So it's never to impress anybody. It's neither impressing to oneself. So, and then mostly, you'll find the majority of the readers will not really like your writing. Because it's as I told you, like their peace is disturbed. But I have the people who have read mine. They have they were jolted, they were disturbed, they had few questions. somehow I haven't got any very bad remark for whatever I have written. I mean, like they have not hated me for what I have written. So it might sound strange, but then I just wonder why it has not happened. So is it there still in them and still they are not practicing? Because what I have written is not something which is into practice, but still they're not hating me. So what exactly is it about? So something is constraining them. Something is not allowing them to practice what is written in it. But then at the same time, they do like it. So that's one idea. And another question which mostly people might have is a writer a control freak? Because we want to change the world. We want to have a different ceiling altogether, a different floor, different wall, or no walls at all. So are we in a way control freak? I must say that to some extent, yes, some will be passive, but some will be aggressive. But yes, we are control freaks, because not in the actual sense of like, this is how you have to live, but then we will be giving options in which the urge to relate with the other, that whatever I'm trying to say, if you're able to understand, I'll be happier. So that urge is so much that it's almost in an obsession level. The only thing, we won't be demanding it much, because you choose to read it, you choose to practice it, or you choose to have it or not to have it. But some way that craving is there. Like, what if it would be like if the whole world becomes like how I have wanted? So a control freak can be there, but it's in a very passive manner you can find in people. And how do we live something else that we aren't? Now, this is something which people generally ask, like, I can talk about my story, my stand, my level of thinking, but then what about becoming somebody else? How is it possible? Now that is just not possible, isn't it? So that's a kind of an idea which people will talk about. So my writing has to be always subjective, my pain, my perception, never understanding the other's point of view or the reason behind a particular behavior. But what I say is, are we that totally incapable of pretense? Are we not used to make beliefs at all? Then even the very statement is not true, actually, because all the time, every moment, we're all pretending at some point of time, like to somebody or the other. We cannot be true to all the time, mostly people. So so it is almost as possible for all to become somebody else. Like there are instances, I'll be using that in lonely marriages. There are under tremendous pressure when one lies to one's partner. No, he puts on a mask, she puts on a mask. They pretend to be somebody else to their employer. They act out roles so wonderfully well. The smallest particular details are conceived with such genius capacity, and such great acts and performances takes place all the time. Yet somehow they never are ready to accept that they're capable of acting or pretending or taking up somebody else's role. Ask them to do the same performance on stage, it's not possible. But then it is never that it is not in them. Pretense or to act or to become somebody else is always there in us. But why are we doing it? We are doing it only when it has to save us. It is never used by us when we think that we can use these and save somebody else also. That part we never do. So it cannot be completely accepted that we are not capable of becoming somebody else. It's possible provided we practice it. And we are towards the end. This is a painting of mine. Let me make it. Okay, this is a painting done by me. I did it when I was in college. As such, those who are not into painting much, they might find it beautiful. But give it to an artist, he would find 1,000 flaws in it. It's a marshy land on which this man is bringing 2 horses. No, this marshy land is very flat here. You will find that there's no depth at all. In fact, the whole scene is the marshy land, like, but then you wonder if it is the sky or if it is the land, because you might be able to see what I'm trying to say, the flatness. Okay, so but it was much appreciated. Got published in my college magazine. People loved it. They all think that I am an artist, but deep inside there'll always be a fear. What will happen if a real artist actually sees it and then thinks like, this is what you people are appreciating it for? So this like, for me, it's never complete. For me, it's never that perfectly beautiful. If I do the same again, recreate it, perhaps it'll be a little better than how it was before. And such is my any work, I should say. When I work, when I write it again, I might find it a little better than what I have already have presented it like. But then if I give it to some of the writers whom I literally worship, they might even throw it away. So they might think that it is flawed. But the point is, I write because I cannot be quiet. I write because I really want myself get expressed. But then till the end of my life, I'll be trying to improvise my own writing. I know I'm not content with my writing. I know I'm not content with my work as such. So one day I might become better, but then I have this Kierkegaard's existential authenticity. I'm doing it because I think that this is better. I'm not someone who's going to get confined with what the rest of the world is offering me with. If it expects me to go by their norms, I have to weigh it before I follow it. I have to really see sense in it. Otherwise, I won't be able to do it. And no matter how much the world pressurizes me with, I won't be able to accept it. So that's the kind of reason. That's the very reason for which I'm writing or I'm creating anything. So I stop with what Sartre has said, that our choices define who we are. We should take responsibility for all our life choices and move on decisively and not be affected by what others might think or imply about ourselves. Now, that way, I felt that this painting is apt because it has lots of flaws, as I told you, but still it's a beautiful painting. And we're marching forward. Someday it will become a very beautiful picture, and who knows, it might even come out with real life, and then that man and those two horses may come alive. Okay, so thank you so much. And this was one recent painting. In this, I was able to create that depth. You must be able to see that far away things are perceptible in dull, lighter manner. Now that's the depth I was talking about. And as Tagore says, we all will have to keep moving forward to that perfection, which we always are craving for. So there's nothing wrong in delaying, but anytime we can start writing. But even before that, we have to read a lot, observe a lot, and then flaws are mentally we have to flaws certain things and become better human beings, and then give ourselves to the world to create something beautiful for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Dear participants, now you can pose your questions to Dr. Shanti Chitra, ma'am. Now I call upon Mr. Sri Shakti Prem, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Kamaraj College, SF, to handle the most intellectual queries of this session. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you for giving us yet another great session. And it was such an eye-opener for many of our aspiring writers. And your new perspective on having the writer's mind compared to mental flaws is kind of a new thing, and we'd like to enumerate on that more in the coming sessions. And for now, I would like to ask our beloved participants in Zoom to put forth their questions to Dr. Shanti Chitra, ma'am. And you could just raise your hands so that I could unmute you and you could just interact with our resource person now. So participants who are listening to us on Zoom, kindly raise your hands so that you will be unmuted to put forth your questions. So before you could get to that, ma'am, we have this question from one of our attenders in YouTube, and Ravi Kumar B has asked, what should be the role of a writer in the society of today?
As I told even before, it's chaotic. It's many things are distorted. In fact, in a way, the urge to write, the urge to change the immediate world is there in us. But then there'll be certain things which will be affecting us the most. There are issues which will be touching us the most. For me, the issues which have always touched is gender-oriented issues, and the issues pertaining to children, and the injustice that happens in these areas have always touched me. And not more of a political writer. So depends on who are we addressing at. And when I address these issues, I automatically do have lots of, I do question legal issues as well. So all these do exist along with. So what happens to a writer is when they write, they're not always welcome, because the majority will not be along with them. If it touches them, they will be along with. One very sad point is our very capacity to suffer for long is not there. We see something bad happening around us, we suffer with it for a while, maximum, say, for example, 10-15 days. But beyond that, we forget. We have started taking it as something which is ordinary. It's part of life. So all the injustice that we talk about is existing, and along with that, we also are living. So a writer can go on writing, maybe after he finishes writing, or maybe he's dead and gone 20-30 years later, some way someone will be able to see what he has written, because that's how most of the writings were observed in this world. Okay, like when he or she was still living and writing about it, hardly had it made sense to most people. That which has actually changed the world are the kind of writings which were interpreted and understood only much later. So we can only hope that a writer keeps writing, and then some changes takes place at some point of time.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I would like to ask Mr. Kevin to unmute himself to ask you the questions that has arisen in his mind.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, Kevin here from SIS College.
Yes, Kevin.
So I usually write poems, short articles and essays.
Yes.
But when I show them to my friends and some audience, so they say to me like it's a bit childish. So how can I improve that?
Then if it is childish, then I think then it must be really good, because we lose our the child in us even before we go to 5th standard, 6th standard. Children nowadays are adults already. I really want to know what makes them think so, but more importantly, do not pay attention to them. Okay, you can always give allowances to. There must be some truth perhaps in what they are saying, so it is always all right to listen to them. At the same time, don't stop writing. I have not seen your writing myself, so I cannot exactly tell you how exactly you're writing. But then I would suggest, if you have this urge to write, you're writing poetry, you're writing poems, you're writing short stories, please continue doing it. But as you're doing it, I want you to expose yourself to more reading. I come across here, somebody has asked how reading will boost our writing skills. The reason why I insist that you read a lot is those are experiences of people which they have presented in their work. And when you keep reading it, it enhances your understanding of life. So what your friends say that, they say that it is childish. So the childish part, if it is actually is there, then it might soon disappear from your writing if you keep exposing yourself to more reading. All that we read, it remains with us. No matter what happens, it will be there with us. At some point of time, if your subconscious is tapped out, you find like everything will be there, like what you find a black box in a flight. It has everything stored in it. So all those informations will be there in you. So you can never say that reading has got exhausted you, or you forget things. What's the point of reading all these things? They all will be there in you without even your realization of that they have become part of you. Okay, so keep reading. Perhaps that way you can improve a lot.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Kevin.
Ma'am, another question from YouTube viewers.
Yes.
The question is, the hallmark of good writing is not to appease the masses and make the characters a mouthpiece of his own agendas, rather allow different perspectives to wrestle and jostle without reducing them.
Can you read the first line again, please?
Do you think that the hallmark of good writing is not to appease to the masses and make the characters a mouthpiece of his own agendas, rather allow different perspectives to wrestle and jostle without reducing them?
I would suggest that, people do suffer. And then when a writer starts addressing that suffering and he becomes a mouthpiece of theirs, it will appease their urge. They would feel like somebody is relating with us. To some extent, going that way is fine, because as I told you, we cannot create something out of the box. So we will be talking only through them, but at the end, as we progress, we will find that we will have to deviate and give them not the kind of the path which is generally is known to them, the right and wrong. There's a middle path which has to be addressed, and this is what a writer must be able to create, according to me, because when you keep telling them that this is right or this is wrong, in a way it becomes a different kind of an indoctrination. So the middle path actually gives a new route, a new way of life, and that is what a writer will have to look forward to. So that is to be done that way.
Thank you, ma'am. And from Zoom, I think Mr. Nupur Paul would like to ask another question.
Yes.
Mr. Nupur Paul, you could now unmute yourself so that you could ask your question.
Hello, good evening, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I am Nupur and I am from Amity University, Kolkata. And I wanted to ask you that whether watching classics can also enhance our imagination and our writing skills.
Watching, it depends. I mean, like, there are children who have watched movies a lot. I mean, all classics almost, and then they have improved their ability to converse. But then when it comes to writing, we have to go nuances, the depth. We express things through words. Whereas when it comes to classical movies, most of them are images. So what is to be get described is they presented as a live image. So we will be missing out certain words. We won't be missing the dialogues. That will be there. But if you have to work on your vocabulary and your ability to paint with words, that is possible only if you read more. But I would suggest that both shall happen. Like it is good that you watch classics, at the same time you read classics. So if both are taking place, then it is good. But one through reading.
Okay, ma'am. So this will be the final question from our participants in Zoom. Yes. I would like to ask Ms. Kinzang Rinzen to unmute herself and put forth the question.
Good morning, madam.
Good morning, Kinzang.
I'm from Bhutan. Madam, in your lecture, you repeatedly mentioned something about the importance of
Kinzang.
reading. Is reading really
Hello?
necessary to... Hello, am I audible?
Yes. Yeah, in between there was a gap. I repeatedly mentioned.
Madam repeatedly mentioned about the importance of reading to become a great writer. But
Yeah.
I have seen so many voracious reader, but they haven't become a writer. Is it really necessary to read a lot to become a great writer?
I'm not talking about becoming a great writer or no, but the point is, yeah, everybody loves reading. Many read, but they don't always end up writing. But as far as writers are concerned, writers cannot depend on merely what they think or what they feel. Then it will become very subjective. So in that sense, I would suggest that we read a lot. Okay, the more you will expose yourself to better minds through books, the better you will be able to write. And so that you'll have an understanding of the whole world through reading. We can sometimes traveling helps a lot. So if you're a person who travels a lot, often, like I'm not talking about just going out on vacation alone. I know there are people who just like that board a bus and then get down at any spot and then they listen to people, observe life, and they jot that down. So that kind of an experience, if you're able to get, if you're able to have, able to travel a lot, perhaps you will be able to. But then if that is not taking place, then you can travel through books. By reading them, you understand the world, understand the minds of people. So that's why you need to read a lot, which I keep insisting upon, because any writer like from Coetzee to even Philip Roth or any other Indian writers, all of them have had this habit of reading a lot. So in their, if they're not writing, they're reading. So this is a kind of a lifestyle which they have always had, and this you have to remember also for yourself. But it is not necessary that all those who read will have to write. Sometimes, the reader-writer relationship is something which is equally is enormously important, because the book is there between us. The writer writes and then the reader reads. Now, reader's participation is equally as important because he interprets. So that way they are also participating. So, but then the asking that all those readers have not written, that's not really as necessary. Maybe they have they have preferred their role of being reader alone.
Thank you, ma'am. That was such an elaborate explanation. So since we are running short of time, and I hope that the viewers of YouTube will not be so upset, because this will be the last question from YouTube. Dr. Shweta Ashwath Avasti has asked, could you suggest any publishing platforms for budding writers?
There are many, but if you're ready to pay, okay, so Notion Press is one through which you can do it, and Amazon is doing it a lot now. So these are all easy ways. You can just send and your manuscript. Sometimes it'll take time because they have to read it, but maximum within 3 to 4 months it is possible, provided your work is publishable. So Notion Press, Amazon, these are platforms which are easier comparatively. So they will take care of everything from designing the cover to the rest. Okay, so these are easy ways.
Thank you so much, ma'am. You are patient enough to answer all the questions, and you have really enlightened this day by your online presence. And over to you, Muthukumari, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we are in our second session of our international webinar on the Writers' Convention. Let me call upon Mr. J. Alangar Ashok, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Kamraj College, SF, to give his felicitation speech honoring Dr. Lydia. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. It is not every day that we get to see in the company of such a talented personality. It is rare to find ourselves in conversation with people who speak English as their native language. The webinar has reached the interview session. I introduce to you Dr. Lydia Ola Taiwo, who is with us now, all the way from Kent, England. I, on behalf of our institution, welcome you, ma'am, for taking time from your busy life as a healthcare scientist and a pathology manager at London Borough of Bexley. Her books recites the retelling of her experience as a child. The three-part book series, A Broken Childhood, is nothing short of a gripping tale of fortitude and struggle. Apart from being an acclaimed writer, Dr. Lydia is truly a philanthropist in every sense of the word. All aspiring writers here today are about to be inspired by you, ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you.
A very good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
It's a privilege to have you amidst us.
Thank you, Dr. Shasikala. Most grateful for being here.
Yeah, we are so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you.
How are things there in UK, ma'am?
It's very nice. The weather is good. It's just 4 minutes before 12 noon.
Okay. How is the condition of Corona right now?
It's going down. I mean, the lockdown has been eased much better than it was before. But I think people just need to take care and wear their face masks. I think it's just somebody else's opinion what they want to do, but I'm hoping that things get better.
Yeah, it will definitely be so. So it's my honor to be given such an opportunity to interview such a great personality like you.
Thank you.
So shall we start with the questions, ma'am?
Yes, please.
Yeah. As human beings, we are not our real selves in public most of the time. We do wear masks to hide ourselves, to hide our real self, especially when we are celebrities. Of course, now it's Corona, which has made everyone to wear a mask everywhere.
Yeah.
But that's not the case with celebrities. We can't express our feelings exactly the way we feel. So how you are yourself, how exactly you are at your home?
So at home, I'm just myself. I'm a mother, I've got children, I've got a husband. I do my housework, I do my cooking, I cook for my family, I spend time with them, I have fun with them. Yeah, just like a normal family.
That's really nice. A typical woman who enjoys everything in life, the role of a writer, the role of a mother, the role of a wife. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
Even great orators are very poor when it comes to writing. How do you describe writing? Is it a gifted talent or a trained skill?
I didn't intend to be a writer. It was my experience that led me to write as a form of therapy. So I didn't realize that I was actually writing anything that people would want to read. So I think the most important thing is if somebody feels like writing, they should just write. And not say, oh, I'm a writer, or how can I be a professional writer? It's about writing something. What are you writing? Is it informative? Is it imaginary? What are you writing about? Would people want to read it? I wasn't expecting anybody to read my work until I actually, there was a child that died. She was 8 years old. She had been abused by her aunt. So her parents sent her all the way from abroad to UK to stay with her aunt. The aunt abused her and her husband, and she died. And I realized that some of the things I had gone through as a child was what that child went through as well. And I felt this shouldn't be going on. And I decided to meet up with a few people, and I said, you know, this is what I've written. This is about me. This is my story. What do you think? And they actually said, you know, you need to publish this because there are so many people out there going through abuse. Some people don't even know what abuse is. They're just doing whatever they're doing, that it would actually help them. And that was the reason why my books eventually got published. So it wasn't that I even decided that I'm going to be a writer. I didn't know I was already one until I started writing.
That's really nice. Virginia Woolf tells that a room of one's own is necessary to write. And so do other writers who have their own requirements to accomplish their task of writing. What do you actually require when you feel like writing? What is the environment that you prefer?
I just need to have an idea. A room with music maybe in the background, or just I can be in anywhere. I can actually be in a place where there's noise going on. If an idea comes to mind, I just have my notepad and pen and I start writing. So it's not that I sit down and say, right, I'm writing something today. I've got this topic or this title. I don't normally come up with the title until the very end.
Yes, of course. Music soothes you a lot.
Yes, music is very soothing.
Yeah, that's really nice. In the present day scenario, even a common man needs to be cautious about expressing himself in words when it is going to be in social media like Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. As a writer, what should be the level of one's confidence with regard to his or her word?
For me, I need to make sure I've got the facts right. So whatever I'm writing about, I also spend some time reading around other people's stories and seeing to make sure that, oh, if there are similarities, then that's fine. So I do a bit of research into what I want to write about, even though it's pertaining to myself, just to make sure that either that information is not out there yet, or if it is, I must not necessarily contradict it. I have to make sure that it flows alongside it, especially if it's the truth. So my writing doesn't normally go out to contradict. It actually goes out to align itself with other writers, or actually to bring in some more information. So when my books get published, or if I'm going on Facebook and I'm talking about it, or I'm going on Twitter, then they know that those stories are actually true. So I try as much as possible to make sure that everything I'm writing about is truth.
That's it. Literature is life. Literature is truth. English is also so. Writing is also so. A reflection of one's own mind, what you feel yourself to be true, you seem to be reflecting in your work. And on to the next question. In psychotherapy, catharsis refers to the process of consciously experiencing deep emotions that have previously been repressed, thus moving them to the surface and allowing them to come out. Your works, A Broken Childhood and What a Life Too, is almost a kind of cathartic writing. So how would you define writing as a cathartic activity?
As a therapy, we will say here, sometimes people go through a lot of things. We see people on the street, we don't know what they've been through. Everybody has a journey, but everybody puts up a front, just because sometimes those things are quite painful, or they might say, who's going to understand what I'm going through? So everybody puts up a front and they go along their journey, but there are triggers in life as we go along that cause us to revert back to some of the experiences of our past. And when I was, in actual fact, the reason why I actually started writing was when I got married, my husband actually saw all the scars. Because I have over 60 scars and injuries that are still visible even till today from the abuse I suffered when I was a little child. Some of those were the scars that my husband saw when, after we got married, and he was asking me questions. And that was when I actually broke down and started crying, and I couldn't say much. And so he was wondering, what could he do to help me? And What he then said was, okay, you know, just write all of this down, because from his experience, when people write things down, it helps them to upload and, you know, get rid of all those things, hidden things that nobody really knew about. And that's how it became a therapy. So for me, when I'm writing, it is more or less trying to remove what is inside, things that you can't really discuss with anybody because they can't understand. But when you put it out there and you actually know that it's going to help or benefit somebody, then that's good. I mean, the book, my second to the last book that I've written, that one was published last year, How to Recover from Abuse. In that book, I was going through the therapy of how to overcome abuse myself as I was writing it. And that was quite tearful because this was an incident that happened in 2018 when the case went to court. But going through it and having to relive it was quite bad. I couldn't get any help from, you know, the counselors would say, yeah, okay, start telling us your story. There wasn't much of a healing process going on. But having to write it out and actually, yes, relive it in that moment, it will make the heart and the soul feel better for it. And that's what I've experienced in writing.
So that's nice, ma'am. Actually, writing is a kind of a therapy that gives a kind of a healing.
Yes.
Yeah. So next is we talk of gender equality and so on. But there was a period when female writers used to write under the pseudonym of men. In the present scenario, has society really accepted the female writer completely? What would be your opinion as a female writer?
I don't actually see any difference between gender when it comes to writing. It depends on what you're writing about. I think the male gender may be writing a lot of things about maybe cars and gardening, certain things like golf and things like many other things, trains and how to do the books, how to do this, how to do that, computers, you know. But sometimes you have writers who are male, but also write stories of abuse. You also have women who do, but you also have women who also write fantasy stories, just like men. Nowadays, I don't think it's an issue of gender. It's an issue of what are you writing about? Will it be accepted to those that you're writing it for?
So being in a westernized place, maybe gender issues don't crop up that much.
No, not at all when it comes to writing, no.
Okay. And when it comes to writing or creative work, when you come into a kind of a public life, analysis and judgment of the merits and faults of a piece of writing is quite common and inevitable. But when it comes to negative criticism, how can one handle it both as a person and as a writer? We have a dual role to play. As a person and as a writer, how could we handle it? Negative criticism.
So as a person and as a writer, negative criticism, I tend to stay away from, I'm not a person that goes onto social media that much. I do when it comes to putting comments on, but I've also had negative comments as a writer because of some of the things I've written, basically because of the cultural influence. Because some of the book, even though I wrote my book for therapy, I'm also being told that, oh, but you know, you should have forgiven your parents, even though if they had read the book, they would have seen the area of forgiveness. They didn't see that. They were more concerned, oh, you shouldn't let this out. You shouldn't have said this. You shouldn't have said that. In different cultures around the world, certain things that people do, others may consider wrong. Others may consider there's nothing wrong about it. And in one of the books, when I wrote my book and I put it on Facebook, just a bit of, it was actually a TV interview that I had on the news. I was interviewed regarding my book and I put that on the Facebook page, and I just wanted to encourage those that have been going through abuse and don't know how to stand up for themselves or not knowing what to do. And then I had a lot of backlash back from the people from the culture, because my parents are African, although I was born in the United Kingdom. And they started saying all kinds of things, all kinds of bad things. And, you know, I just felt the best thing for me to do is just to shut down from this and not even pay attention, because if they knew any better, they wouldn't say or do the things that they were doing at that point in time. In actual fact, I went back on it a couple of days later, only to find that some people were now contradicting those same people. So I saw that other people were fighting my battle for me, which was quite interesting. So as a writer, when it comes to negative criticism, I stay clear of it because it sometimes causes one to be demoralized and feel bad. So for me not to see it is better. Now in person, I've been to different gatherings where I've been invited to talk about my work. And I've had people who will stand up and say a few negative criticism, critic words. And sometimes I have to refer them back to the book. Many a times that's what I do. But I try to keep a straight face, and I try not to let them know that, yeah, that hurt, but I must still give an answer, and I'm still able to give a positive and a positive answer to turn around what that person has actually said. Because sometimes people say it out of ignorance. They don't know any better, so they'll say whatever they want to say. But when they get that level of understanding, they will not be talking the way they do.
That's true, ma'am. That's true indeed. Writing is an outlet to oneself, and at the same time, it connects us with the world. So what is your opinion on the purpose of writing? To whom does the author truly write?
That actually depends on the information. So if it's a non-fiction, if it's a fiction, if it's an autobiography, if it's a biography, if it's a memoir, it actually depends on the individual who's writing. You as the individual will decide, who am I writing this for, and target that audience. My books were for children, for adults, both male and female, for families, for social services, for those that deal with safeguarding children. Those were the people, for university graduates. I mean, I didn't even know that my book was going to be recommended by a lecturer at one of the universities to the students to read who were studying social care, social work. But when I began to see that that's where most of the people that were reading my book were from, that type of audience, I then decided that it's better for me now to look at my audience specifically. So now I have the medical side, because sometimes they come across children who have been abused and they don't really know it's abuse. So they needed to know what was non-accidental injuries and accidental injuries to know which ones were abused or not. So my work as a matter of writing a bit more, it's actually opening more to different groups of people that I never knew it would do.
Thank you, ma'am. Life can be given various definitions. For some, it's a cakewalk, while for others, it's not a bed of roses. What would exactly be your definition of life?
I would say life is a journey of purpose. It has its ups and it has its downs, but it's there to make, as one is going through it, it shapes one into something or somebody for the purpose for which that person was born, I think. So for me, even though I went through all the abuse, I didn't actually see it as anything, because I thought that was how everybody was being dealt with. I mean, using cable wire to hit a child, using a mop stick to hit a child on the head, I thought that was just what everybody went through as a child, until later I realized that it wasn't. And so now I use that experience, that life experience, to work with people young children who have been abused, to educate parents, to enable people to understand what parenting actually involves and what it doesn't involve. I work with schools, teachers, letting them know the impact of abuse on children, because it's not just as a child, but as one gets older, the impact is still there, except if they've gone through some form of healing or therapy.
So your life in the past, it's got its own effect. So a deeply distressing or disturbing experience topsy-turvies one's life. In what way do you think trauma is a necessity for appreciating life?
Trauma. A lot of people go through trauma and they end up depressed and sometimes suicidal. So it actually depends whether along the way they have received some form of support. However, trauma also enables people to become resilient at a point in time. And that resilience helps them to face life. And the outlook to life is much different to somebody who has had a comfortable life.
Exactly. And we all live with the thought of hope that nothing lasts forever, even our problems.
Yes.
If in case you are given the option to change one thing about your life, what would it be?
I think it would have been the first 20 years of my life. When I was growing up, the first 20 years when I was going through abuse of different types. Yeah, if that could be changed, then yeah, that would be what I would like to change. Though it can't be changed, but then it's made me to see that there's wickedness and evil in the world and to empathize with many others who are going through the same.
So that has, those 20 years of your life has made you what you are today in a way.
In a way, yes.
Yeah, that's true. And there are so many factors or so many reasons for which people write. Like you have so many factors you take into account when you think about what one is going to write, or the fame that one gains, or personal satisfaction, or appreciation that goes along with writing. But what exactly makes one believe that he or she is a writer? There are so many reasons.
That's a difficult question to answer, because you wouldn't know that you're a writer until you start writing. When people read what you've written as a manuscript and they feel that, oh, this looks good, you know, why don't you publish it? Then you start writing, or you go to the publishers. If the publishers accept your work, because in my case, I first self-published. But then when I was told that, oh, your work is quite good, why don't you get a publisher to publish it? And so I was then able to present it to certain publishers here and in the United States. And they decided to take my work on and actually commended me for my work. So I wouldn't call myself a writer. People do call me a writer. People call me a celebrity because I've been on TV. I've been at different meetings. I'm just ordinary me. I just do what I've got to do. So maybe that's why I find it difficult to answer your question.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you. And there are many writers who have brought about revolutions and great changes in history. What really is the true power of words, either in the written form or in the spoken one?
Could you come with that question again, please?
There are many writers who have brought about revolutions and great changes in history. They have been a kind of an inspiration, motivation, and so on. So what do you think is the real power of words, either in the written form or in the spoken form? The power of words.
The power of words. Power of words can either change for the better, or it can actually destroy. So in my writing, it's about change, changing people's mindset, changing the situation, changing the facts, making people see that abuse is not good across the nation, but starting from where I'm based, which is in UK. And that is now coming more to light, because from some of the work I had written in the earlier years, it has caused a few changes within the social services system. So before, for example, whereby a parent has been caught abusing their child and the social services comes in, or the police, and they're asking the child questions, they do not now ask those questions in the presence of the parent. They'll actually take that child aside to ask the question, and then they can ask the parent. Because if that child is with the parent, the child is not going to say anything and will not tell the truth, which happened in my case. So that through my writings and through discussion, that has changed. So that has been law that has changed. But there's still much more to be done. And I'm hoping that over time, those things will also be changed as well.
Thank you, ma'am. Narratives are written in such a way that it touches the heart of one, or at times makes one think. How far narratives influence the people to change themselves or acknowledge themselves?
If people have the opportunity to read the books, for example, in my books, it tells you, it explains how, for example, to overcome abuse, how to overcome it if one has been abused. And it takes you step by step how to go through the process. Now, if people are able to go through that process, it will help them to change their mindset, to change the state of mind, to change how they feel, and actually begin to move from where they are and actually see that there is still hope and there is still life that they can live for.
And every writer is a product of his or her environment, age, or predicament. How far has these aspects brought out the writer in you?
It's still doing that. I could say the age, in terms of age, now I got to a point in age where I wouldn't say I don't care, but I'm not as afraid as I used to be able to talk about things. As a young person, you're too scared to talk about things because you're afraid of what people will say. But as you get older, you will write down whatever you know. As long as it's true, as long as it's the fact, you will be able to write without fearing that something is going to happen. So in terms of age, in terms of gender is not, I don't believe, is an issue here in the Western world. Age, anybody can write a book as a young person. But when it comes to certain facts, because what happened is that even though I'm writing my story, it involved my family, it involved my parents, and that was an issue. Now, when I finished writing the book, yes, I was concerned that, oh, what would they say if they read the book? But the fact is, what is in the book is true. So it didn't matter because I was able to stand and say, yes, this is true. As long as what you're writing, when it comes to nonfiction, as long as what you're writing is the truth, or even fiction, I mean, it depends on what you're writing. But if it's a factual book, as long as what you're writing is true, it doesn't matter what age, what gender you are, you're writing what is true to change people's mindset, to change people's thinking. Because if people don't know any better, and this is what my husband tells me, if they don't know any better, they'll continue doing the same thing over and over again. But they just need to hear, oh, this is not right. And they will then be able to think about, they said it's not right, why is it not right? And they begin to dig deeper and see that, okay, so this is not right. And they've learned something new from that. They'll be able to tell somebody else. So as the books are being written, the books themselves will begin to promote themselves.
So it is the urge to write and the purpose for which you write matters a lot.
It does matter, yes.
Yeah.
It does.
And connecting yourself with the readers is an essential thing needed for a writer.
Yes.
What are the factors that could connect the writer with his reader?
So in most of my books, I will maybe write a paragraph and then I'll say, what do you think? So I'm asking the reader, what do you think about this? Do you think it's right? What would you have done if it was you? And those that have read the book and they've reviewed the book and they talk to me about it, they said, wow, I said, you're able to connect us, because when you say, what do you think? I mean, going through what you've been through and then asking, what do I think? It actually makes the person to think. And it makes the person to see, wow, did the person actually go through that? Because some of the things that I've written in my book, people can't comprehend that I actually went through those until they see the injuries themselves, because I still have the injuries. And they always make mention that, how did you manage to get through that? Which is the question that was in the book. How do you think, and I'm asking myself as I'm writing, how on earth did I manage to get through that? And so it gets the reader to think, how did she manage to get through that? And so it's a way of connecting, is making the book interactive. So you've written quite a bit. So for example, when I think there was a time when I had to get home at a particular time from school. If I got home late, I would get beaten by my mom. And on this particular occasion, I ran home and I got knocked down by a car. I got hit by a car. And I then narrated what happened. I was taken to the hospital. They bandaged me up. I was brought home. And I was then saying as I was writing that, my mom didn't even come to me in the hospital. It was my father that came, but she was the one that said I should get home in time. And so the reader, I was not asking, so what do you think? How could she be so mean? What do you think about that? How could a mother do that? It then begins to make the reader to think about it a bit deeper before moving on.
Yeah, I understand. I'm here to interview you because I felt connected. The moment I started surfing about you, the details that I gathered, I felt connected with the writer, the content, actually.
Thank you.
And that's really true when you communicate the same. Many of us do not know the potential we are gifted with. As a writer, what do you think are the traits that could make one a writer?
Well, I think reading, one needs to read sufficiently, read in the area that you want to write about. Travel, I think the last speaker spoke about traveling. The other trait is to have an ear for information, wanting to ask questions, being inquisitive, wanting to know a bit more. When you now put all these together, or somebody who imagines things, imagine an imaginary story, as long as there's a plot, as long as there's a character, then there shouldn't really be a problem with writing. It depends on what the person wants to write about.
So reading enables one to become a writer. In
Yes.
that way, Robert Louis Stevenson has told, I kept always 2 books in my pocket, one to read, one to write in. It is generally believed that reading enhances a writer's skill.
Yes.
The question is, with excessive reading, do we have an impact on the writer's work which disfigures his or her own creativity? You have the impact of the thing that you have read, that it might have an influence on the writer's own creativity. Is there a possibility for that?
It is a possibility. And that's because I still, even though, yes, I've done my doctorate, I still do a lot of research. I do a lot of reading. And in one of the last trainings that I had the opportunity of doing, I think it's about 2 years now, it was something that I was thinking about. So why have I gone through all of this? Why did I have to go through this? What did my parents get abused themselves? Why did I have to go through all of this? And I then saw, the training I did was, the title was ACE, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences. So people who have gone through adverse childhood experience can go on to abuse other people, can go on to have health problems. And I thought, oh, wow, that's great, because I can actually use this piece in my next book. You see, so for me, it was, oh, I could have put that in my other book, but anyway, I can write another one now and actually include that in my book, which I released a book in June, just a few weeks ago, which was How to Escape Your Abuser. And I actually put the learnings from that in the book so that people can actually relate with it and say, oh yeah, I've been abused before. This has happened to me before. That means that maybe the person who's been abusing me has been abused themselves. That's why they're still going on to abuse, because hurt people hurt other people. Okay. And it will help them to be able to understand where the abuser is coming from. I'm not saying that the abuser is doing what is right, but at least it will give them some understanding about the mind of the abuser themselves. So yes, I believe that reading has an impact on what you want to write about. Yes.
Yes, ma'am, of course. It definitely has a kind of an impact. And we have a general tendency to be carried away by the title of a work. A Broken Childhood, for example. I was simply carried away by the title, A Broken Childhood. What do you think are the factors that could be considered while naming a work? Like whether it should be catchy, different, or it should communicate the gist of a work? How do you title a work?
Most of my titles, I think the only title that I've done myself were the last two books. The What a Life one, that was self-published, and I had to get people around to, let's see, what title can we give this book? The book had already been written. So I won't spend time on thinking about a topic or thinking about the title. I will write first. So after writing, the title will come one way or the other through what has been written. And giving your work to somebody else to read ahead of time, they can actually be suggestive to you of a title as well. So the title is not the first thing. That title or the topic can be in one's mind, but that may not necessarily be the title. The Broken Childhood title also came from the publishers as a suggestion. And I felt, oh, that's good, that's all right then. But the last two books, I actually chose the titles myself after I had completed writing.
So choosing the title yourself, you would have felt very comfortable.
Pardon me?
And choosing the title yourself, when you did the whole thing, it would have been really nice on your part.
I would say I was still learning in the first few books, but now I suggested the titles and the publishers accepted it. But initially I was okay, what do you think it should be? But now I work with my publishers as in, okay, let's look at it this way. And then they might tweak it here and there. And then we've agreed a title. But this time around, I was the one that actually engineered the title.
So that has proved that you have established yourself as a great writer.
Well, if that's what you want to call me, thank you.
It's nice, ma'am. Once in an interview, you have told that writing the book was very challenging for me. It made me revisit my past, which has been an emotion and therapeutic experience. Writing the book was a great challenge in itself. The more tears I shed, the heavier my hand was to write. How did you befriend your fears and learn to write with ease and joy?
It depends on what you're writing about. The book I was writing about, or what I was writing at the time, was more or less getting all the pain, all the hurt, all the bitterness out of me, which I didn't even know was there. So when I was crying and my hand was actually shaking, I couldn't understand how deep it had been for me. Now, and that was then, so it was difficult to write. There were a lot of challenges. And it took me 12 years actually to write the first book. Even though it's a small book, it took 12 years because it took 12 years to get to that point of forgiving my parents as at that point, and also being able to write. Because after I'd forgiven my parents, I then was able to write it very, very quickly. Even though, yes, it was therapeutic, it was more or less clinical, I was able to write. But now, the last book I wrote, this one was actually an ebook on Kindle, was How to Escape Your Abuser. I was able to write that one. It wasn't personal to me per se. I was able to write it at a much faster pace, and also knowing that I'm helping somebody. So the feeling was different.
Oh, so ma'am. And no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader, no surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader, says Robert Frost. Reflecting the writer's emotion on the readers is a rare thing to achieve. When I happened to see the title of your book itself, I was a bit moved on looking at the title itself. So how can the writer reflect his emotion on the reader?
I think when I mentioned earlier, making the book interactive, bringing up questions that will cause the reader to be thinking about the content of what they've read. Everybody that has read my book has always shed tears, whether male or female, all of them, no matter the age, they have actually shed tears. I've had ministers of religion reading my book and shedding tears, because for them, I actually tell them, I now have to tell people that, you know, before you read my book, just have a box of tissues because you're going to likely need them, because you might find some that may actually make you tearful. But now, if I'm reading those same books, I'm not tearful. It may be that I'm looking for some information that, okay, I need to get somebody to read a particular page. But I didn't ever believe that people will cry when they read my book. But I think it's the thought-provoking questions that have engaged them, that makes them to think a bit deeper, that actually brings that about.
That is what exactly you call as the connection between the reader and the writer.
Yes.
And to the last question, finally.
Okay.
As you know, when you take up writing as your profession, you are always open to criticism, both positive and negative. But it is always the negative criticism that pulls us down. What would be your suggestion to overcome this negative criticism to become a successful writer?
Being negative criticism, I try to stay away from. From one of the books I put on Facebook, because a lot on social media, it's a very big platform where a lot of criticism can come. People see it as an opportunity to say whatever they want because they're not seeing the person face to face. They're just writing something. So for me, I can stay clear of looking at Facebook. I mean, if I see, because I normally get notifications, so if I see a notification that is just being negative, I just switch it off. I don't even bother going through it, because I want to fill my mind with positive things. Because when people say negative things, it's either because they can't do it themselves and they don't want you to do it and they're envious that you're doing it and you're going to get better than them. That's the reason why people positively criticize, negatively criticize. They don't really want you to do what you're doing. And I've learned that over the years. So when I see somebody who wants to be a bit negative, I just stay clear of that person. I take positive criticism because it helps you to improve your work. But when it's negative, 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 then I just stay clear of such a group or a person.
The world would have been much better if people are able to take only positive things.
Yes.
But though we try to stay away from negative criticism, it is the negative criticism that reaches us the first, that reaches us most of the time.
Yeah.
And you are indeed a great writer to have overcome everything.
Thank you.
All the negative criticism, having the ability to set things aside and take only what you want, which has molded you into what you are today.
Yes.
It was really a wonderful session with you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Shasikala.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Just stay connected. We have our viewers who are ready to pose their questions.
Okay.
They are bubbling with enthusiasm. The questions are popping up. And we have Mr. Prem to connect with you with the questions, both from Zoom as well as YouTube.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Nice
Thank
being
you very
with
much.
you.
Nice meeting you.
Dear participants, you can pose your questions now. Now, let me call upon Mr. Sri Shakti Prem, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Kamraj College, sir, to handle the most intellectual queries of this session. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
I hope it's evening there. No, it's afternoon there, right?
It's afternoon, just after 12 now, 12:39.
Okay, ma'am. So it was such a wonderful session by you, and thank you for answering all those questions with so much insight and depth. And I hope you could give the same opportunity to some of our participants who have joined us through Zoom. And at this moment, I would like to ask the participants in Zoom to raise your hand so that you may ask your questions directly to Dr. Lydia. So I would like to ask Mr. Kirandeep Kaur to unmute yourself and ask your questions directly to Dr. Lydia. Again, I would like to ask Mr. Kirandeep Kaur to unmute yourself and ask your questions directly to Dr. Lydia Taiwo. So before we could get to that, I think we could just answer one of the questions from our viewers in YouTube. Mr. Sony Mandy has asked, should we sugarcoat the truth or pen down the bitter reality when we write our memoir?
I believe you should write the truth, because if for any reason somebody wants to take it to court, then you could be held liable. With my case, I didn't even know that it would go to court because my abuse wasn't exposed until 2015. And through the investigation, all they could say was that my story stacks up, my story is true. And because my story was true, they were able to take it onto court, because I was being told, or the police were being told, that I lied, that I cooked up the story. So you need to be very careful that if it's anything factual, you need to tell the truth. Make sure it will not stand against you. Because it didn't stand against me, they could not hold any of the content of that book. It actually revealed much more than what they even knew about the abuse investigation.
That's very helpful and great advice to our aspiring writers, ma'am. And I would like to ask Mr. Kanhu Charan Barada to unmute himself to ask his question to Dr. Lydia. Mr. Kanhu Charan Barada. So one of our viewers in Zoom has asked, what would be suggested to stay impersonal in the public eye while writing about personal experiences?
You can stay, that means you want to keep yourself private, then you can use what we call a pen name. So you're actually using a name that you'll be using for your writings, but you can still put it out. You can still put the story out there as factual, but it still must be the truth. I hope I've answered that question.
Ma'am, one more question, and this is from Kirandeep Kaur. And I would like to ask Mr. Kirandeep Kaur to unmute himself and ask this question. Mr. Kirandeep Kaur, could you please unmute yourself?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am,
Hello.
you're audible. You could ask your questions now.
Okay, okay. I had some net issue earlier, so I couldn't unmute myself. I have one question for ma'am. That is she think any work which is a masterpiece according to her, which she has read recently?
Any book that is a masterpiece. I mean, it may be a masterpiece for me, but it may not necessarily be for you. It depends on what you like to read. At the moment, I'm looking at different books, maybe to build up my mindset or to look at books in my profession. So I read very widely. I don't have any specific type of books that I actually read. Is there a reason for that question?
Many writers have the inspiration in some kind of writing. They might be writing some person's style or language. That is it. It is only a general question, not a specific one. It was a general question, ma'am. Thank you.
I didn't hear.
Hello.
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 Hello, I can hear
Excuse me,
you better now.
Mrs. Kirandeep Kaur, could you be a little more louder, please, with your question?
Okay, I was saying that it's only a general question, and because many writers are motivated by some writers, a way of writing or their language use or some techniques which the writers use while writing. So I just asked the question out of curiosity only.
Okay. Yeah, my books were written based upon my own personal life experiences. I have looked at other people's books who have also written on their own life experiences, which shows that yes, it is possible to do. Because if other people have done it, you can do it as well.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dr. Lydia, ma'am. And I think you have answered a lot of questions today, but this will be, I promise, this will be the last question. And this is from our faithful viewers from YouTube. And Mr. Rosmal PJ has asked, trauma once experienced by a person helps him a lot to identify with others who go through similar experiences and also empathize with them. How will a writer be different in this case?
How will a writer be different? Is that the question?
Yes, will the writer be as empathetic as any other person who has experienced trauma?
If it is somebody who has been through that same journey, they will be very sympathetic and empathetic as well. If they've not been through the journey and they're just, maybe they did the course and you learn these things, but you don't actually go through, so you're learning through book knowledge, then they're not going to have much empathy because they've not been through it. But somebody who has been through it themselves, they can empathize with the reader. So when I'm writing and I come across a lot of people every day, oh, I can't forgive my parents, oh, I can't forgive this person, this is what this person did to me. I say, okay, you know what? Read my book. Read my book and see whether it will help you. And when they read the book, I give them about a week or two. When they've read the book, they will say, well, if you can forgive your parents for all that they've done to you, there's really no reason why I can't forgive mine, because they didn't do as much to me as they've done to you. And so just for them to read the book has actually helped them to change their mindset. But somebody who has not been through anything, in my case, I'm dealing with abuse cases here. People who have not been through that, getting them to write, they're just going to write words that really don't have any feeling or any meaning.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for answering all our questions so patiently. And finally, I think we have come to the end of this webinar, and I just want to ask you what is the one or the single word of advice that you would like to give to aspiring writers or to anyone who would like to express themselves in words?
What I would say is, if you want to write, write. Get as much information as you can from research, but don't let anybody tell you that you can't. Because until when you start, you will not know that you can.
That's brilliant, ma'am. Thank you for your profound words of wisdom. And over to Mrs. Muthumari, ma'am.
Now the sessions are over. Respected professors and dear students, please do fill in the feedback form to get your e-certificates. Thanking everyone for the success of our international webinar on the Writers' Convention is a crucial part of the webinar. I call upon Mr. Sri Sakti Prem, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Kamraj College, sir, to give the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Well, things have come to a close, and it is time to bid farewell. Today marks the very beginning of our little project, EL. We hope to give you more interviews on some of the most prominent writers of this day. I hope each and every one of you are benefited profoundly by our endeavor. Dr. Lydia Taiwo has recorded our efforts in the pages of history by giving us such a wholesome interview this evening. I am baffled and amazed to realize how much people respect your ideas and keep their word even if it is not legally bound. I respect and will forever be indebted to Dr. Lydia Taiwo for believing in us and collaborating with us. Ma'am, you are indeed a genuine educator. You have proved here today that the transfer of knowledge can be free of cost and can be open to everyone. I, on behalf of our institution, on behalf of our student community, and on behalf of our nation, thank you for your online presence here. Thank you, ma'am. It is the pride of not only the Tamil people, but also the nation itself to have a writer stemming up from our own soil. Dr. Shanti Chitra is nothing but humble in enlightening the people with the sweetness of literature, even in this time of social distancing. The ease you offer to your sessions makes them easy to understand, and it garners much attention from our audience that even the most indifferent of masses find liking towards literature. May your service and your achievements as a writer progress to new heights. I thank our President, Mr. P. Lango, and our Secretary, Mr. Rajendran, for providing us all the facilities to organize these webinars. I thank our Principal, Dr. D. Nagarajan, and our Director of the Self-Financing Wing for giving us, Dr. A.M. Tony Melvin, for giving us the permission to embark on such activities. I offer my special thanks to Mrs. K. Shamala, Head of the Department of English, for doing everything in her power to help us organize this webinar in such a beautiful way. I thank you, ma'am, and can do nothing but request you further to help us the same way. I personally thank each and every member of the department for the good vibration and assurance that you give to make our job so much easier. I can count on the fact that you will also give the same support and the energy in all the webinars that we are about to do. I literally have no words to thank all of you enough. My sincerest gratitudes goes to Mrs. P. Andal, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Science, for being our technical coordinator and doing all that is necessary to ensure a good show. Mr. P. Saravanan, Superintendent of our college, needs commendation for handling all our online necessities with such patience and sincerity. Now, I wish to make account of the magic that we are all a part of. There is nothing holding us all together despite the calamity we are in, except for this undeniable love of literature that makes all of this possible. I thank the English language for providing me with the living and for enabling me to connect with everyone in my locality and as well as the entire world. Our audience who had made efforts to be here now, we take all your comments very seriously and we try to work upon that, and we take them and we consider them so much that we try to change the way we organize webinars. And as we go on, we try to improve and we try to do better webinars. And when it comes to the issue of e-certificates, I would like to bring to your attention now that we are now able to provide 1,500 certificates per day. Please understand, as I repeat it, we have upgraded our servers to provide 1,500 certificates per day. I hope this will be enough. And as an assurance, I would like everyone to find the description box of this YouTube video so that you could find all the necessary details to ensure that you get your e-certificate. So providing you with an e-certificate is a promise that we won't fail to do. Hence, coming to the close, we have people gathered here online from nations like the Philippines, several provinces of Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Pakistan, Cambodia, and many other parts of the world. To you, we, the Department of English, offer our sincerest appreciation for joining us time after time to make such wonderful experiences. We have so many events planned for the future. Hope you can join us again. And once again, thank you, each and every one of you.